Hello, everyone. My name is Jay, and I am part of the IMT. Thank you for taking your time out today to take part in this event on automation and job loss. I am part of the International Marxist Tendency, a revolutionary organization of workers and youth fighting for social transformation of society. And we are active in over 40 countries worldwide. And before we begin this event, I want to talk a little bit more about the IMT. If you're interested in our organization, please visit our national section at socialistrevolution.org. And if you're interested in the work that we do here in Madison, please visit our website at imtmadison.org. And we're also funded by our members and supporters. If you want to support us in building the forces of Marxism, you can donate at our Venmo, which will show at the screen here at IVYGERTS. And we'll be providing a short lead off from two of our comrades today that will go into the topic of automation and job loss. The streaming will be provided on Facebook and YouTube. And we will also have a Zoom discussion afterwards that I hope that those of you who are watching will join us. If you have any questions about the topic, or if we want to hear what you think about the topic as well. And we recommend everyone who is watching to join us, and hopefully we can further this discussion. And I want to talk a little bit more about the topic today of automation and job loss. This is a very important topic in regards to our current time and in regards, to COVID as well. Automation, which was already developing as a force before COVID, has become an even more a bigger force in today's times. If you look at what COVID has done, what would take 2 decades has happened in a matter of months, and we're seeing that due to the transition to remote working, a lot of corporations are speeding up automation, and this is causing a lot of job losses in terms of the economic time before COVID and now. We're seeing that a lot of working class people, especially within the factories, for example, are losing jobs due to COVID, and a lot of corporations, in order to adapt to COVID, are resorting to automation. And the group who's being most affected by this are the working class, especially women of color. Young people are being forced to go towards unemployment, and corporations adapting to this are resorting to automation. And so, this topic of automation and job loss is not something that's happening in the future. It's happening now as we speak, when millions of people are being laid off, and the economy that existed before COVID is something that we'll never return to. So we're reaching a new period of economic anxiety, and automation, instead of benefiting society, is forcing many people in unemployment and causing more further distress and economic anxiety. So this topic is very important, very relevant to working class people, and it's only going to get more important as automation becomes more and more a part of our daily lives. So continuing on that point, we're glad that everyone is joining us today. I will first talk about our comrade Alex, who will talk about the economic perspective on automation and job loss, and then we will transition towards more. Comrade Yvonne will talk more about our plan and the fight for socialism. So thank you again for joining us, and I will hand it off to Comrade Alex, who will speak a little bit more on that topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay, for that wonderful introduction. Hello, everybody that's watching the video either on live stream or later in our archives in Facebook and YouTube channel. The job that I have today is, in a brief period of time, explain from a Marxist perspective how we see this process of automation and answer some of the questions that we see posed in front of us, right? May I start by saying that it's very clear today that many jobs and even careers or industries are being affected very quickly by the automation and new technologies. If in the 80s, for instance, or the 90s, we see the introduction of robotics and some uh, highly complex machines that were able to replace some of the repetitive motion or repetitive task, things like welding, folding, moving things from one place to another, is being replaced by machines. And in doing that, many times losing jobs. We see that in mass numbers. In one of the sources why we see deindustrialization in the United States, for instance, right? How many jobs, for instance, in the textile, I'm thinking right now, the textile industry, where it will take hundreds, no thousands of workers on a factory to do all kind of textile things like fabric itself, t-shirts, like all kind of garment. It quickly is being replaced by big machines that are able to do this kind of job very quickly and somehow productive. And consequently closing factories or reducing or massive layoff and reducing the number of people. However, today we see that the pace of this kind of replacement or the end of some of those jobs into this dead end of technology seems like it's accelerating, and it's kind of like putting this question in front of everybody. Not only from the unions or from the working class movement, for the young people that are looking in a very kind of like dark and doomy perspective. What is the market looking by, right? Like maybe 20, 30 years ago, you could make decisions like investing and going to college or investing to learn a trade, and most likely spend most of your life in that track, right? And making some kind of wages and prosperity, or at least that's what we were promised to. And yet today, things are changing so fast that it's very easy to end college thinking that you are going to work on one career, and that career will be obsolete, or at least not as value in the market as it was when you get in that career, right? So clearly, it's a question in front of us that is very persistent, very important. It's the pace in how it's transforming our perspective is increasing a lot. Not only from the perspective of the working class and the youth, obviously, on the working class with the unions against all these massive layoff, and by the way, every time they introduce these new technologies, many times they use it to create a army. We call it Marx, call it as army of labor, right? Of reserve of labor. All this unemployed, which it's used to leverage the position of the capitalists to decrease the wages, right? So as there's more unemployment, the wages goes down because there's more competition between the workers. So that's kind of like another thing that is happening every time there's new technologies in this way. But also, and perhaps this is something new, is that the bourgeoisie, the capitalists, they are also having the same perspective that this pace is so fast that literally is going to leave millions of workers without a job. We see especially the tycoons of Silicon Valley, including the CEO of Facebook, Amazon, or Google, who, in our opinion, very hypocritically, but also showing a general pessimism that we see in society on the question of technology, right? That they say, well, we're doing so good, we are so effective, we are so productive, we are so confident that artificial intelligence, new technologies like this, especially the information technology and what we can do out of it, there's going to be millions and millions of people that never are going to have or be able to have a job. And they are proposing things like the UBI, the Universal Basic Income, as a way to minimize or delay the effects of a society that is becoming jobless. Now, from the Marxists of the INT, we see this from a different perspective. And one of the reasons why we see it in a different perspective is that reality, the promise that new technologies will liberate society from work is nothing new. I think if you go back to the 1600s or the 1700s, the the same proposals were done, the same ideas were done. The introduction of the steam engine or the mechanized of some of these textiles I was talking before, but in the 1800s, where manual labor was replaced consistently for a more automatized, more machine involved technology. It was on one side, it was a reaction of the workers at the time, saying, we are losing our jobs, and we are also being devaluated, right? Because it will take years to train somebody to be a good, for instance, textile worker at the time, just doing the fabric and weaving and whatnot. And quickly, that just will be simplified to a point that you don't have to train somebody a lot to be able be in the assembly line or to be manning some of these machines, consequently devaluating the contribution or devaluating the price of that wage, right? The social value that that worker might have. And then there was the Luddites, I believe it was, there was a movement actually destroying machines back in the 1700s and 1800s, where the anarchist movement too, when they see technology as the enemy, right? Not as the beginning of lifting the living conditions of many people, or even having a society that is able to produce more basic needs cheaply or easily, so we are able to have a better society for all. So it's nothing necessarily new. What I think is, or what we think is a little new, is that even the capitalists are saying, we don't see a way out on this. Now, the other aspect why we see it in a different way is that, well, not only new, but in reality, the introduction of new technologies in the past have not always been equivalent to lose jobs. In fact, when the economy was going up, when there was what we call a healthy capitalism, in reality, new technologies was actually good. You will create new industries, new commodities, people will buy it, and therefore they will create new markets. And maybe the old jobs that disappear, it will be multiplied for new jobs, and especially the expansion of the need of labor in these new industries many times will means actually more jobs in one way or another. So in reality, this equation of technology is equal to no new jobs is actually nothing to do with the technology itself, or the race that the capitalism have, or what we see in the last 200, 300 years in history, right, where we have developed the means of production immensely, from very rudimentary manufacture in the 1700s to semi or full automatized factories that are able to produce millions of items a day with very, very little labor. It's not that technology what really is the limit of the jobs created. Is really the health of on one side is the health of the capitalism, which I will discuss now a little bit, and the other side is the questions is still the same: who gets benefit, who gets appropriated from all the value that is created by the workers, and we call that the fight for the surplus, right? And I will go that in a second, but we think that there's not much difference today with, for instance, in the late 1800s in this country, in the United States, when workers start fighting for the 8 hours day, right? I mean, people will work sun up and sun down, many times 12, 14, 16 hours a day for one journal, right? For one daily wage, not even per hour. And they knew that as the capitalist was expanding, and as the technology was incorporated, there is more and more money produced, right? More and more value created by those workers, that it wasn't going back to them. In fact, more and more of that money was created in the form of profits, right? There was a divide. There's a lot of wealth created, but more and more the percentage that will go to the capitalists was bigger and bigger, and that will translate on the condition of the workers not to be left. So the struggle for the 8 hours a day, in fact, was a struggle to reappropriate a wealth that we create as workers on the factories that will go out of our hands in the way of profit. Today, they will be the equivalent, not to say that it's not going to be more jobs, but actually it will be the equivalent to fight for the 20 hours week or 10 hours week, meaning that we cannot allow the capitalists to take the big lion part of the economy. Meanwhile, we are destituted, we lose the jobs or the ability to survive. However, if in the 1800s, the workers, late 1800s, the workers were in the context of a healthy capitalist, emerging capitalist system that it was able to improve the means of production and expand the markets and sell more things and grow. We have exactly the opposite today. Since the 70s, we see a system that is basically wounded, unable to play a progressive role in economy. So of course, the specific weight of the workers today is very different. That we have 140 years in the 1800s, right? The workers were fighting for a bigger part of for better wages and lower hours. In a situation where the capitalists need workers and the capitalists need to expand the markets. Today, we are in a 50 years period where the capitalism is just going from one crisis to the next one to the next one. And we as Marxists, we have explanation for this. Again, we don't think this is random. We don't think this is dictated by some kind of unfortunate events, but actually because capitalism have a very good thing and also a very bad thing, right? Capitalism have been able to socialize labor to a point that all humans on the planet, we are interconnected. And in doing that, through forcing most of us to have a job and get wages, and then participate in the market by buying commodities, right? Things that other workers have produced. He also has been able to facilitate the expansion of means of production to the point that we can have these big factories, we can have these big advancements in technology because all those resources are heavily concentrated on production. And the market actually is constantly posed and pressure the capitalists to continue these improvements on technology, right? Because if you have two people competing in the same market, whoever have the more productive way to produce something, meaning that they spend less labor, right? The cost of production in the end is going to be smaller to do a similar quality commodity. It's going to have the upper hand in the market and win the battle between the competitors, which is, as you think about it, it's impossible to stop technology. And that's one of the answers that we have on this topic. There's movements now very pessimistic. They say the best thing that can happen is go back on the clock, forget about internet, forget about technology, forget about artificial intelligence, because those are the end of humanity, right? Those are the end of jobs. That is creating a dead end for the world. But we contest to that is absolutely another case. It's comparable to have more technology with the growth of the economy. What we don't have is a fix for the biggest contradiction of capitalism. While they're doing that, while they are able to accumulate wealth and reinvest it and expand it and make a lot of money, every time they do that, the capitalists are creating a crisis down the road, because at the end of the day, who buy those commodities and guarantee there is a market is the workers themselves. The same workers, they are creating that value, they are creating those commodities to a point that if the better profits the capitalists make, the bigger the crisis is going to be in the future, because there's always to be a super production. There's going to be more commodities on the market that we can buy, because we don't receive the value that we produce. We receive a small part in the form of wages compared with the output that's guaranteed with our labor. That and only that is the crisis that we see today. The lack of jobs, the destruction of jobs is not determined because we have technology that are destroying jobs. I mean, if that would be the case, obviously, when we were going from very manual labor in the 1600s and 1700s to heavily mechanized labor in the 1800s, even in the first half of the 1900s, we would have seen a problem of unemployment, and yet we didn't see that. The crisis that we see in 1929 was not related with the introduction of new technologies. It was related with this constant contradiction of the private property of the means of production. The idea the small handful of capitalists are making all the money, right? They get in their pockets bigger and bigger, and yet you have a big mass of workers that are getting lower wages, and they are not able to buy up what they produce, and that's the crisis that we live in today. In 1929, the only way we get out of that spiral of destruction of jobs, it was actually the Second World War that effectively destroy largely the productive capacity of the world. I mean, pretty much a good part of Asia and Europe, obviously, and that allow the material basis for a boom, for kind of like a reset of capitalism, as you may, right? Where the markets now, they were open, there was a lot of things to build, you know. So for the period of time, especially from 1948 to 1973, give and take, what you see is an increase in employment, and you have an increase in productivity, and you also have increase economic growth. Absolutely very harmonic. But also, as I said before, the main contradiction wasn't resolved. At one point, the competition starts and start fostering or moving to be more effective on one side. So you need less workers to do the same amount, and on the other side you have overproduction. You have a lot of commodities on the market, exactly like in 1929. It started happening in the early 70s. The difference between 1929 and the 1973, the so-called oil crisis, is there is more mechanisms today to know when you need to close a factory instead of producing a lot and have the warehouse full of inventory, as it happens in 1929. Now, with all this said, we also have to see, and I think I'm starting to finish my part of it, right? But one way to demonstrate what I'm saying, in terms like this is not a new problem, and actually it's not that problem. The new technologies is not what is creating this jobless, pessimist outlook that both many people in the working class and youth, but also the capitalists are seeing, right? Is that even today, with all this technology and all this techno future that is presenting in front of us, in fact, many capitalists are resorting to the opposite. We see many industries that instead taking on the new technologies by default, actually they rather employ workers on what we call extensive labor, meaning basically do very low-tech task that it creates a product. I'm going to put a couple of examples of this just to put it in context. The iPad, the Apple iPad, which in many ways is the poster child of what technology can be, right? This idea that we can have a very powerful device that is able to connect us worldwide with everybody, that we can do many tasks that usually you need to be on an office and a desktop and things like that, with the comfort of your car or in the park or in your house. It definitely a good symbol or symptom or symbol really of this technology and these advances. And yet, for a long time, it was mostly done by hundreds of thousands of Chinese workers doing very small little tasks that have nothing to do with this robotics. You know, they do everything automatic and whatnot, that sometimes we imagine that the commodities are created magically in a factory that is fully automatized, you know, especially when you talk about new technologies, and far from the truth. Apple rather to employ 100,000 of Chinese workers on low wages, obviously, on a low skill, mechanization, automatization, compared with what is possible. A camera the other day was giving another sample. From the beginning, Uber and Lyft were very interested to know how to replace workers with self-driver cars, and now there is a slowdown on that incorporation, that technology. Not because the technology doesn't work, but it's still, and I think they start figuring out that drivers can be exploited, but the machines that they replace them cannot be exploited. You cannot get profit out of a machine as you can get profit out of a worker. Or in other words, they steal what we produce when we work as humans. But when you replace a human with a machine, the machine, you cannot pay a machine more or less. It's going to produce what it's going to produce, and basically that is going to be transferred into the price of what you are selling or you are producing. While when you pay somebody a salary, you can always try to pay that person less, right? Either because there's more unemployment, maybe because the economy is not very good. We see how workers have less buying power than they have before. For instance, at the beginning of the 70s, because there's been an attack on wages. There's been an attack of living conditions of the working class, and with that, we are actually more profitable than this, right? Even today, we see industries here in the United States that it could be mechanized completely, and they are not, for the same reason. And I'm thinking, for instance, laundries, like industrial laundries, where still today you have a lot of workers working very hard, folding and doing jobs that it could be easily replaced by a machine, but not for the benefit of the capitalist, really. So in reality, that's what we see economically, right? I think I'm going to land this by saying that in the end, from the Marxist perspective, what we see is an economy that is failing, not because the technology is replacing jobs and creating a crisis, but because the capitalism is in crisis, because the property of all those machines, all that technology, all that knowledge is creating a overproduction crisis based on that most of the workers are getting very small wages, so we cannot buy out all this production, and that this crisis can only but get bigger as the technology, just as the technology is introduced. What is happening is that there is a big push for being more productive, for producing more to more scale, which it means two things. You have less workers in some industries. You have less workers working, doing more output. So that obviously creates an even bigger overproduction crisis. And then on the other side, you have industries or capitalists that they are going to look into the cheapest possible labor to not to buy those machines, but still being productive. Which, by the way, it creates pretty much the same symptom or the symptomatic crisis, which is a lot of workers who are now working more hours during the day, getting less wages, right? Workers that they cannot participate in the market equally because they don't have enough money to spend, which at the same time, it creates the same crisis of overproduction. We as the Marxists, what we put forward is the following, and I know that's coming right after me, but what we say is here now in capitalism, instead of blaming technology for the destruction of jobs, we should blame the capitalists to literally sink us in a crisis that is worsening the living condition of billions in a moment that we can guarantee abundance of every single commodity that everybody needs. Doing like that, every time they say the jobs are replaced, what they are telling us is that this system, the humanity as a whole, we get it, we accomplish it. We are in a point in history where with very little labor participation of humanity, we can satisfy most of our needs. In the hands of the capitalists, this translates into more crisis, and this translates also into more scarcity, and translate into more disaster. But in socialism, it will be exactly the opposite, right? So instead of blaming technology, we should celebrate it, but at the same time, I think it's clear that we have to fight even stronger against this system and for the right to have a better society. I think I'm going to let it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex, for that great lead off on the economic perspective on automation. I'll now pass it on to Comrade Yvonne, who will provide more of a fight for socialism and some of the programs that we present as the IMT for that cause. So I will pass it on to Comrade Yvonne.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jay, for that warm introduction, and as well to Comrade Alex for getting us started here on a little bit of the framework for this topic on automation and job loss. And some of you that are watching today, we're so glad that you could join us. Might be kind of wondering, in March of 2021, why are we talking about automation? Why are we talking about job loss science and technology? Then I think, remembering right now that at least in the United States, we are in the beginning stages of a vaccine rollout, a new science, a new technology that has been developed, but is being rolled out in a super uneven way. Is just, but sort of one historical context for what we're talking about. The example that Alex brought up about driverless cars, right, is another one that's really, I think, in a lot of ways on the forefront of everyone's minds. There's tons of science fiction movies and books that have been coming out as well, imagining another sort of end of history, right? As Alex was talking about, this idea that the majority of humanity's needs could be met actually with machines, with machinery in a lot of ways. And what that kind of a future, might look like. And a lot of current science fiction imagination has actually been super, super pessimistic. And as Marxists, I think it's our duty, to be really optimistic about this, but also to link up sort of like, this question of automation and job loss, and how that's related, but also to the need to change society, right? And to really stress that change in society is possible. So when we talk about automation, we talk about science, we talk about technology, we talk about innovation, I just want to clarify, a couple things. Innovation, this idea of the actual development of science, scientific know-how, right? Is one thing, right? Technology, though, is then the application of that know-how in terms of society and in terms of production. And automation, really specifically, is that use of technology, that largely automatic equipment in the larger system of manufacturing or production. And I think automation has historically, as Alex talked about, really been looked at by a lot of members of the working class as something to be suspicious of rather than optimistic about. But that's also because in the experience of the working class, many times, it has resulted in job loss. And while some pessimistic economists, capitalist economists, might talk about creative destruction as this positive sort of way in which, it allows capitalism to sort of reset itself and then orient, the forces into something more productive, rarely, if ever, are the workers who lose their jobs actually retrained by this system or by the capitalists in a new or different job. And so a lot of workers are sort of left by the wayside, right? I recently had somebody I know say like, oh, why are kids complaining these days about the state of the world? You have a computer in your pocket that has access to all of the information possible and all of the entertainment possible. Why is anybody complaining? And I'm thinking like, yeah, a kid with a pocket computer who still lives in a favela outside Rio de Janeiro or in one of the slums of Mumbai, if that kid even has a pocket computer, is still struggling with how to make ends meet, how to survive, how to feed their family, right? How to access things like potable water and basic healthcare. And I think if you've joined us, this question of like the huge advances in technology existing, alongside scarcity, right? A super abundance existing alongside scarcity is something that you've been thinking a lot about, and you're sort of wondering, how it's possible that these two things can exist side by side. And it's not for a lot of people something that hasn't been, I think, at the forefront of our minds for quite some time, right? It's been in the last several years that, at least in the United States especially, but I think all around the world, the banner has been raised. There's an awareness of this 99% versus the 1%. And I think, a lot of folks out there are asking, like, well, what can we do about it? And I think, the first thing I want to point out, as well as before, in preparation for today's discussion, I kind of did just a little bit of digging about, what's the kind of most interesting or advanced or crazy technology that exists right now, right? Things like driverless cars we've talked about. But there is a refrigerator that can be attached to Wi-Fi and can track the contents of your fridge and let you know what you're out of and what you need to order. There is a washing machine developed already by Whirlpool and I think GE in 2016 that could automatically order your detergent for you from Amazon whenever you were running low. There are translator earbuds now that you can walk around with and in real time have a conversation with somebody else who speaks a different language. These are the sorts of advances that we have, while at the same time we have 265 million people worldwide who are living on the edge of starvation, and where half of the world's population lacks access to things like basic health care. I think the COVID pandemic that we've had to live through in the last year really put a lot of these contradictions very starkly in front of us. In the United States, what we saw was the loss within the space of just a very few weeks, the loss of 40 million jobs. 70% of the job losses worldwide were actually suffered by women, and a lot of these jobs are jobs that are not coming back. And so all around us, what we see is this chaotic, senseless, brutal system. And so I think, again, what we need to do now is connect it to, the need for a socialist revolution, the need to struggle to change society, because I think under socialism, under a democratically planned economy, we could put all of the technology that already exists, but also all of the innovation, all of the ideas that are kept hidden, right, from bettering the lives of humanity, from raising the standards of living for everybody, that are kept from us under patents and intellectual property and whatnot. When you have a vaccine that takes as long as it did to be rolled out, because you have how many corporations fighting each other for being the first one or one of the first, to come out with a vaccine, and in order to line their pockets, right, to literally create millions and millions and millions of dollars in profits, at the expense and at the misery of millions of lives all around the world. What we say is that what we need is a rationally and democratically planned economy, a plan of production, so that society could put all of this technology, as I was saying, to in the hands of the working class in order to raise the standards of living for everybody. And we know that this is something that can be done. And so if you've joined us today and you are looking for ideas, and you've been looking for an explanation for why things are the way they are and what can be done about it, we highly encourage you to not only join us right after this event for the discussion, but to start reading, right? To start learning and studying the ideas of Marxism, to study the ideas of economy and of history, so that we can put an end to capitalist misery. So definitely check us out locally, imtmadison.org, as well as our websites, marxist.com and socialistrevolution.org. We know that only through socialism can we have quality healthcare for everyone, a socialized healthcare system, that we can have quality education for all, and we can end unemployment and at the same time reduce the work week, right? But in order to do that, we need a class independent organization with a socialist program that mobilizes our siblings in the working class, in their workplaces, in their unions, in their organizations, in the schools, in the streets, and at the polls, so that we can fight and so that we can win. So I will leave it there.
Thank you, Yvonne, for that great lead off on the fight for socialism in our program. Thank you again, Alex, for the lead off as well. And I want to thank Liam, who is working on setting up the Zoom and doing the presentation. The Zoom link will be provided in the comments, so be sure to look out for that. And thank you, everyone who has taken their time out of the day to watch this event. Really happy that we were able to do this. And I can definitely talk about the upcoming event that is coming as well on March 30th on regards to COVID and campuses. It'll be about how students are affected by the pandemic. Please take a look at that on our Facebook page on IMT as well, and our website on IMT Madison. Please do join us for that event as well on upcoming Thursday on March 30th. So thank you again for everyone who's watching. Please take a look at the Zoom link, and we can hopefully continue the conversation. If you have any questions regarding this topic, questions for our organizations, and we love to hear what you think about automation and job loss. So the Zoom link again will be on the comment section, and looking forward to having that discussion. Thank you, everyone.